Okay, good evening, everyone. We'll call this meeting to order. First order of business is disclosure of pecuniary interest and general nature thereof. Second, seeing none. The minutes from March 15th on our budget committee. Was any errors or omissions? Seeing none, mover and seconder for those minutes then. Mover and Serna, all in favor? Carried. Delegations, presentations. Tanya, we're going to move you up to the requests. Okay, we'll pass it over to you.
Okay, Mayor, Deputy Mayor, Councilors, I present to you report FIN 22-08, the 2022 Council grants. So you'll notice the applications listed, and the total grants for 2022 amounted to $23,200 for service clubs and $26,000 for cemeteries. The total amount of donations is included in the proposed 2022 budget. Staff is looking for confirmation as to who council wishes to support and in what amounts.
Okay. Excuse me. Thank you, Tanya. I think we'll go through this one by one, and as Tanya said, everything, I think Adam has said, we're looking at 1.8. Is that correct, Adam?
That is correct for the draft budget. We've revised it to 2.09.
Okay.
So,
And this is everything as asked is included in that 2.09, correct?
if all the grant requests are passed, that will match what has been included in the 2022 draft budget.
So we can adjust it up or down according to our wishes. So we'll deal with, first of all, the Santa Claus Parade. It was $1,500 in 2021, and they're asking for $1,500 in 2022. Any issues with that one? I don't see anybody. Okay, so approved. Family Fun Day, $325 in 2021, the same in 2022. Any issues with that one? Okay. Aylmer Museum, $5,000 in 2021. They're asking for $8,000 in 2022. Where do we want to stand on that? So you're suggesting 6,500? Is that what you're suggesting, Max? Quite an increase. I mean, I certainly support the museums and what they're doing. $1,500 is what, 20%? No, 10% is 5,000 or 500. Yeah, about 30%. Yeah, Rick?
Mr. Mayor, how much is Elmer giving the museum?
Usually it's matched. I don't know, but
I think they give quite a bit more.
I'm not so sure they do. But Adam, could you get any insight on that one?
I'm not aware of what they pay.
I think they pay more, and I think the museum is a good idea.
Just trying to see if they listed it, but we'll check.
While we consider that, just one quick comment, because, you know, the rationale, I think, is what bugs me, because it says that it's because they were unable to fundraise due to COVID. And I know personally that I have been actively fundraising for the last year and a bit, and other organizations locally have also been creative in their fundraising. So I can appreciate, you know, some limitations, but I find it a big increase for the reason that they're providing. So I'd support at the most Councillor Moore's suggestion.
Tanya?
It said last year the grant from the town of Elmer is $20,000.
It's
That they received
20,000.
20,000.
20,000. 20,000 is, and we're giving 6,500. It's supposed to be a shared thing. And I know the museum is always struggling for money, you know, and I just think that maybe we should kick it up a little bit.
Well, Max has suggested 6,500, which is,
Well, but that's not even close to 20,000.
well, I'll remind you, the museum is in the town of Aylmer, so they get a little more benefit than we do with the, anybody that's coming in.
Okay, well, whatever everybody decides.
Well, there's a suggestion by 6,500, so I'm guessing, I'm looking for nods, whether that is adequate. Okay, so I get enough nods that 6,500 is acceptable. Aylmer Policing, $1,500 last year, they're requesting 2,000. Issues? Max, you're on that committee. What's the reason for?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We haven't had a meeting in what, year and a half? So we're putting some ads out and things there in regards to the school and safety issues. I'm agreeable with whatever.
I would support keeping it at 15. I sit on the committee as well, and we have not really spent money. We don't have a plan. Again, to me, if you're going to increase your ask, there should be a rationale. So I don't know if there was something in the application that would justify the increase, but there hasn't been any.
There's nothing
or
stated
very
about,
little activity.
nothing stated about a need for an increase, so suggesting to leave it at 1,500. Everyone all right with that one? Okay, 1,500. Knights of Columbus Park, 2021 was $1,200, and they kind of use this to pay for the taxes, so I assume the taxes are going to go up somewhat, and they're requesting $1,250 for 2022, so I think that's reasonable. We get nods on it, Jess?
The Knights of Columbus, the taxes are in the amount of 2,100. And we're giving 1,250, and there's what, 800 kids enjoying the benefits of Knights of Columbus all summer.
The town usually matches what we give as well, so that kind of covers the taxes. And that's the intent of the grant, is to kind of cover the taxes, so.
You know for sure that they're matching?
They have in the past, and so I'd be very surprised if they didn't, because half the kids that participate in soccer are from the town as well. I mean, they're coming from Belmont and outside of Aylmer and Bayham as well. But they have in the past, so I'd be very surprised if they wouldn't support it as well in 2022. So 1,250, everyone's happy with that one? Elgin Plowman's Association asking for 500, they're requesting 500. Everybody happy with that? Kinsman Club did not apply in 2021, largely for the fireworks display at Canada Day. I'm assuming that we'll have a fireworks display in 2022, and they're requesting $1,500. Is that's what we did previously, Adam? For the Tanya?
Previously, they applied for the Elmer Parade. They haven't applied for fireworks before. So in the past, their application has been, I believe, 500 for the parade. So this is a new request for fireworks.
So
They didn't apply for the Elmer Parade this year funding. They want to focus on the fireworks.
So previously was 500,
Yes, for the parade.
and so now they're asking for 15. That's quite an increase. What do you want to do? Previously, we donated 500, and they're requesting 1,500. Chester?
Do they have a collection at the people coming in?
For the Canada Day, they do.
And I thought that's what helped pay for the fireworks.
Usually, I don't know, I'm not a kinsman, but I know it probably went a long way to supporting it, whether there was sufficient to cover the fireworks, but of the 15 or the 5?
Where are we at?
Well, previously was $500, they're requesting 15.
Whatever the rest of the council can reach.
Well, I'm just saying it's triple what we've donated in the past, and obviously we can't triple everyone's grant request. Scott? Yep.
Through your worship, I'd say we should go for 1,000. We definitely want to support our local clubs because they do keep our community involved in keeping everybody together now that we're allowed to go back together. So, I'd make a motion that we support it for 1,000.
Okay, there's a suggestion of Scott by 1,000. Everyone's nod. Okay, we'll make that one 10,000. Cemetery board, previously 5,000, and requesting 5,000. Or sorry, what says 5,000 on mine?
Yep, 5,000 for the Springfield Cemetery Board.
Yeah, that's been kind of a constant request. Everyone agree with that one? I mean, it's our responsibility, basically. Amherst Cemetery Board, 18,000 last year, 18,000 requested for this year. Once again, it's a kind of constant request. Everyone good with that one? Luton, 2250 last year. They're requesting 3,000. I would suggest I know one time we bumped it up because they wanted to do some fencing and so on. I'm going to suggest we leave it at 2250 unless there's something that specific and they're not indicating there's a specific request other than just the usual maintenance. So 2250? Okay. Springfield Family Fun Day, 1350 last year, and they're requesting 1350. Everyone good with that one? Okay. South Dorchester Optimist, 3,800 last year, and they're requesting 3,000. So very seldom we get a reduction in requests. So I think we better take advantage of that one. Everyone kind of nodding. Okay. Springfield Swans, $1,675 last year, and they're requesting 2,000. They probably put as much money back in the community as any of our local charities. So I'm suggesting that we grant them a request of 2,000. Springfield Softball Association, 2,100, and they're requesting 1,600. So once again, we have a reduction in requests. So I'm suggesting we take advantage of the requests. Okay. Okay. That covers it, Tanya? Okay, so everything we requested, report number FIN 2208, title 22, grant request be received. The following 2022 grant requests for the community groups to be included in the 2022 budget. Mover and seconder. Whitner, Moore, all in favor? Carried. And Adam, you're doing the next one?
Yes, thank you. I'll be doing a presentation on the township's 2022 draft operating budget. So just as a reminder, we're on our second day of budget committee meetings. We do have a third meeting if needed, if there's any outstanding items that come from council discussions or deliberations today. If we don't have any of those items, we will cancel the third meeting. Okay, so as promised, I was going to give a financial update for things that happened between the budget publish date and today's meeting. First and foremost, Port Bruce flooding. So we've been tackling this one on two fronts: the financial impact to ratepayers, property owners directly, and the financial impact to the municipality itself. So we pursued a grant for property owners called the Disaster Recovery Assistance for Ontarians. It's an application-based program which provides financial aid directly to eligible property owners. So the status on that one is that all required documentation was promptly submitted to the province. A decision from the province on program activation is expected soon. So no official word from the province, but I think it's looking it's looking like we fit the bill in terms of what their program criteria outlines. So looking forward to a response on them on that one. The other one, not so good news, municipal disaster recovery assistance grant provided to municipalities to help cover the cost of natural disasters. The Port Bruce flooding was certainly a natural disaster, but our application is likely ineligible because of the potential financial exposure doesn't meet the criteria for what they would step in and fund at the provincial level. So it had to cost the municipality about 3% of our own purpose tax levy, which would be about, I wrote it in the report, it's around 225,000. From what we've been billed so far, I would say the flood's going to cost us between 75,000 and 100,000, which would make us ineligible. So unfortunate for us, we're going to have to use our internal funds to fund the flood instead.
Can you break that down just a little bit where we're spending 75,000 to 100,000?
Certainly. Most of the money was spent on excavation costs. Garbage collection was much less, and then staff wages above what we would have normally incurred round out the total. So not all billings have been included, but we have been pushing our vendors to bill us as quickly as possible. Don't wait till all the work's done. Like, we want some interim billing to see if we were going to be eligible for this grant or not, but it appears that we're not going to be. If that changes, we can still apply. I wrote the date in the report. It's escaping me. It's in like June, July. So we have some time if things change, but I don't think they will from what I've seen.
So excavation, this would include the high hole and the trucking to get rid of the ice, is that?
Mostly, what was the contractor, Matt? Do you want to help me out? Was it Lamers? Yeah, Lamers, yeah.
Okay.
Okay, so moving on. The other major item was, and I'm going to kind of straddle what I'm legally allowed to say in open council here, but we have been made aware that we have some upcoming tax write-offs or assessment at risk. Without going into the details, I'm just going to read the statement here, just to warn council that we have some bills that we're going to be paying that we're going to be using our contingency funding to fund. The township is receiving regular legal updates for an ongoing appeal with the Assessment Review Board that should be considered as part of the 2022 budget strategy. Details have been provided to council in closed session in the past, last June. Once the matter is resolved, council will receive another closed session update. So quick points: tax write-offs are a regular part of municipalities' financial operations, regardless of the outcome of the appeal. There is no fault on the township's part, as the dispute is a matter of assessment, which is determined by MPAC. So it's an assessment matter, provincial jurisdiction. These things happen. Tax write-offs are a pretty common occurrence. This one just happens to be a larger one. Now, the township has potential financial liability of $283,000, and further information can be made public once legal proceedings clear.
So before we leave that, will we be discussing this in closed session on our next council meeting?
I will bring a closed session report once we have an official outcome from the legal proceedings. If council wishes me to just provide my perspective as to what's going on with the situation, I'd be happy to do that. My thought was to bring something back once the matter's been resolved.
What do you suggest, Adam? I think Dominique and I are in a bit of a unique situation.
This isn't that.
Oh, this is just, this is pipelines?
Yeah, yeah, so if council desires an update from staff in the interim, as our treasurer suggests, we can happily do that on this topic. And we have an upcoming meeting next week that we could put together a brief update if council desires.
I think council should be in tune of what all the potential write-offs are, then we're aware of them, and they've been ongoing for a number of years, and I think they've kind of come to head. But I'd appreciate that for our next council meeting, to do that and close and see where our liabilities are.
Will do. Okay, moving on. At the last council meeting, staff were directed to include a Crossley Hunter signage into the 2022 budget. The estimated cost of the work is valued at $2,500 plus HST, which is recommended to be funded by their roads reserve. Do we want to take questions on that one as well before I move on?
No, I think the council kind of gave direction that we should be going ahead with that, so that's kind of a given.
Perfect. Okay, so in summary, Port Bruce flooding, 75,000 and 100,000, fund through contingency reserve. That's what we have the reserve for. So we're not going to increase taxes directly as a result of the flood. Tax write-offs, same thing. That's what we have contingency reserves for. Crossley Hunter signage, we're going to fund that through the roads reserve, so no direct impact to property taxes for 2022. But what I am proposing, which is a deviation from the 2022 draft budget, is that we reverse a decision that was made to cut contingency transfers to reserves. The reasoning for that being is that a lot of money is going out and we need some sort of mechanism in the budget to repay those funds over time. So it's a pretty conservative approach if you consider, we have almost $400,000 going out of contingency funds. We need something to repay it back, and we're proposing it be repaid back slowly. So that does increase the tax levy for 2022 if accepted by council, and I'll go into the financial impacts of that decision so council can deliberate. Okay, so this is similar to what was presented in the draft budget. Prior, we were projecting a 2.5% township tax rate increase. We're now at 2.94. That's including adding back the contingency funding transfer. Counties remain the same. So that brings us to a 2.09 consolidated tax rate increase as opposed to the 1.88 that was included in the 2022 draft budget. There was some talk about the assessment benchmark that we were using to calculate the impact to an average household. So rather than speculate, well, we'll talk a little bit more about assessment later in the presentation, but rather than speculate what the average household how they could be affected, I just presented different assessment ranges. So we're completely clear and transparent of if you fall within a certain property range, this is going to be the impact to you. So it's about $6.75 per $250,000 in assessment per month. $6.75 per month. That's residential. We also report on farmland being another major tax class for us. So instead of the 2.5, again, we're at the 2.94. And then the 2.09 instead of the 1.88. And same thing, with the average farmland is considered to be $822,200. So a monthly increase of $4.83. Okay, so on median property assessment, this is from the Ontario Property Tax Analysis, which is from the Ministry of Finance. These are our median property assessments by class, just for council's information. We also have a property count there too, just if that is an interesting metric for council to consider. So you can see the CVAs haven't changed from 2021 to 2022, which makes sense because we're currently in an assessment freeze. So assessments do seem lower than probably what most people would have thought because they don't represent market value anymore. They don't come close to representing market value anymore. So there's a sense that when we report on a $250,000 average household, that we're kind of purposely manipulating the numbers. But it's important to consider when you're looking at your property taxes to look at what the assessment is on your property tax bill as opposed to what you think the house could sell for, because we're in a drastic difference now. And further to that point, I get this question every year, so I was just going to preemptively do this little analysis for everyone, literally every year. So what happens when market values catch up with assessments? So say we have a $250,000 household and MPAC comes in and says, now it's $500,000. Are your property taxes going to double in that instance? The answer is no. This is going to be a very simple analysis. There's many different things that can happen in a reassessment year. But generally what's going to happen is if the assessment goes up across the municipality, we're going to cut our rate. Tax rate works differently than any other tax rate, rate. Property tax works differently. We budget by the dollar amount, not by the rate. So you think of something like HST is always 13%. Well, property tax rate is not always 1.48. We can cut it in half if our assessment doubles to get the same outcome. So in this scenario, the property assessment doubled from 250,000 to 500. So we just slashed our rate in half, and we ended up collecting the same dollar amount. We're not going to collect more than what we need to run the municipality. Okay, so where do your taxes go? A lot of them go to the county and the province. About 46.8% go to the township. And that is broken down by roads as our primary use of taxpayer funds, followed by emergency services, which is both fire and police. Infrastructure investments refers to our capital investment program, so actually roads are included in that as well. And to a lesser extent, garbage collection, drainage, parks and recreation, conservation, and general government. I do have a note here that we do receive provincial funding for general administration that's being applied against the general government category. So that's in the amount of $837,200, just for transparency purposes.
Adam, can we go back to the last picture here where our market value? In the past, when there's been a shift in classes, I mean, certainly when farmland went up in value, basically farmland went up like 12%, and literally housing stayed at the same or even went down. So now the shift is going from farmland up to housing. Should there not be a reassessment where the farmland goes down?
Yeah, you're right. An outcome of reassessment is tax shifts. So I didn't want to get this complicated into it, but what can happen is if a class assessment goes up faster than another class's, it can shift tax burden to the class whose assessment is going up faster. But on a total basis, it's there's winners and losers to it, right? For every dollar that that a class pays more in taxes, another class pays less. So on a net basis, they say property reassessment is tax neutral for a municipality, and that's what they mean. If someone's paying more, it means someone's paying less. We're not collecting more on our side. Okay.
Yeah, I'm well aware that we're neutral, but there should be a shift whenever the province decides to go to market value assessment again, bringing up to, because this hasn't changed since 2016, right?
That's correct. We are using 2016 values, and it is, I wrote a report about it earlier last year, as we know, that we're forecasting a shift from farmland to residential because residential property value has skyrocketed, right, since 2016. So you're correct in your assessment.
Okay, so this will be, have they indicated 22 is exempt, is 23 considered back to
I believe, I'll
market value?
refer to our deputy treasurer, but I believe 2023 is also going to be frozen for assessment. I can't recall what I had written in the report earlier this year.
Okay, so it won't be till 2024 till things get rectified. Okay. Go ahead, Adam.
Okay, so moving on, this table was presented in the 2022 draft budget and really tells the story of why the tax levy is going up. So I'll just go through item by item very briefly. But if you want more information, each section is written about in detail in the draft budget document. So wages and benefits, we know what's going on there. We'll have an increase every year for wages and benefits. No new positions are being added in the draft budget. And we're doing a 1.5% rate increase just as an inflationary adjustment. Waste collection and disposal, we renewed our contract, and with fuel going up, it's no surprise that our cost to collect garbage has also gone up. So a bit of an unfavorable result, but we won't see this every year. We'll just see an inflationary adjustment going forward for our waste collection contract. Vehicle equipment repairs, this is more of a historic adjustment. We were looking at how much we've been spending in repairs historically and what we were forecasting for 2022, and we came up with this adjustment. Building Code Act compliance, we had a bit of an issue where building permits were being used to subsidize property tax funded services, so we're making an adjustment to bring that in line with the Building Code Act. Ultimately, building permit revenue can only be used for building to enforce the building code. Pier debt payments. So this was a project from 2019 to do rehabilitation on the pier. You had structured the debt so that you were just paying interest until the actual project was completed. So you're having some interest-only payments. You made one payment at the end of last year, and now in 2022's budget, we're adjusting it so that the full amount of the debt payments will be absorbed into the budget going forward. EECC operations, that was from, we know the story there. There's an increase made from the joint board to fund the ongoing operations of the complex. Insurance costs increase about 12.5%. Actually pretty good from what I've heard from other municipalities, unfortunately. But that's we're seeing between 10 and 20% across from my discussions with other treasurers. About 10 to 20% is pretty typical for yearly increases for insurance. And capital funding, this is split into 3 sections. This is to improve our roads, bridges, culverts, and drainage, as well as our vehicle and equipment transfers to reserves, which funds the capital program. And various, we didn't touch the budget very lightly. We made a number of line adjustments, as you could tell as you were going through. So that's just the aggregate of a number of adjustments. On the good side, funding OMPF, that was the unconditional grant from the province. They changed their funding formula, which benefits us by $43,900. That's expected to continue going forward, thankfully. I think they're getting the message that municipalities are needing further support from the province, because we've seen this OMPF grant increase. We've also seen the OSIF on the capital funding side increase in the same year. So it seems like someone's looking at our issues at a provincial level. Blue box grants relates to the garbage collection costs. They too changed their funding formula. That netted us an extra $45,724. Garbage levy increase, garbage tags went up, the garbage levy went up $5 annually, and that's what that amount relates to. And then we cut about $106,000 in our budget without affecting service levels. And that leaves with a property tax levy increase of $336,111. Okay, so just very, very briefly, I want to talk about the township's financial position, because we're talking about contingency funding. How much do we have in reserves? Are we prepared for these events that come out of the woodwork and we have to fund all of a sudden? So I want to talk about debt and reserves specifically, because those are the 2 areas that us financial folk hone in on. So firstly, debt. The township has used 10.2% of its available debt limits by the province, according to its 2020 financial information return. County Elgin average, excluding Malahide, is 25.2. So that tells me we've done a good job managing our debt, which is a great news story. It could mean other things as well. Normally, debt follows growth. So I do see a lot of municipalities that are growing at a quick rate do tend to run up their debt. I don't count all debt as equal. I count growth-related debt as kind of a better debt. It's almost like an investment into future property taxes, future rate collections. So I don't think the numbers tell the whole story. Some municipalities in the county who perhaps are growing very fastly could be incurring debt. But there's always a story there aside from the numbers. But I think the story for the township is we have done a good job managing our debt, and that's a good news story. If we were looking at any growth-related opportunities in the future, debt would certainly be an option to pursue. Reserves. So vastly different reserve strategies have been employed by the county municipalities. Reserve per capita ranges, so that's amount of money in reserves divided by population, range from $377.75 to $3,324.07, with an average excluding Malahide of about $1,600. Malahide retained about 1,000 per population by comparison. I wouldn't let that discourage you. I think that we are fairly well prepared, as evident by the fact that we're able to fund these significant tax write-offs. We're able to fund a flood. I think you're in a pretty good position. and both your contingency funding and your capital reserves. It's just something we'll want to keep an eye on. But I'm pretty encouraged by the township's position currently and what we're able to do with these unforeseen events. Okay, so in summary, 2022's draft budget accomplishments during difficult economic circumstances. So we've offered a reasonable increase to taxpayers at a $6.75 per month on average, if approved. We've improved capital funding to keep pace with infrastructure demands. We've planned for current and future financial threats. We've corrected area of legislative non-compliance, and we've saved taxpayer dollars through cutting budgets without affecting service levels. We've altered budget documents to improve transparency, and we've partially reallocated township reserves to maximize funding available for use. So I think it's a good result. I think it's a fair budget package for residents. And with that, I'll take any questions council may have.
Okay, thank you, Adam. And certainly in the past, your initial outcome is 2.09, and usually we start off of 6, and then we try to. I know we've had a four-year budget that we try to at 3%, and so certainly 2.09 I think is very, very acceptable. So I'll pass it off to the rest of council to questions or comments in regard to the budget. Mark, did you have a question?
Yeah, just through to Adam. Adam, the insurance, did we have any claims last year?
I would have to look into that. I can't recall off the top of my head. I've been functioning more in 2022 just with my start date.
I know you don't think it's much of an increase, but really it's enough of an increase for if we don't have any claims. And I sometimes think they raise it just because they can. I don't like that. Okay.
So municipalities are just becoming increasingly risky to insure. We can be a bit of a lawsuit magnet. So even though we're not having claims, we're just inherently risky because of what we are and how the law works in regards to these claims that we can see.
Just have another one.
Go ahead, Mark.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through to Adam again. Can you the Port Bruce thing we were talking about, $100,000 for extra? Is that extra over and above what we tender for to get the dredging done, or is that part of it? Like we tender every year for the.
Perhaps I'll take a stab. So every year we tender to have to retain the consultant. In this case, it's Lamers to do the work on standby. When Catfish Creek passed a statement out of the township that ice breaking should commence, that's the bill that would be, and correct me if I'm wrong, staff, that's what's being billed in accordance with the related to the flood. So when Lamers went down there and started ice breaking until they finished, that's the bill that we would associate with the flood directly.
So much per hour, so much per whatever.
And including the trucks to the where it's dumped and everything like that.
Yeah, thank you.
Any other questions for Rick?
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor, to inflation is running rampant right now. And how much of that is going to affect our budget? Because I think right now it's just 5.1%. And I think listening to your presentation, you said 1.5%. That's a big difference.
Yes. So the 1.5% is what staff wages are going to be going up. So yes, our inflationary increase for staff wages is not matching the cost of living, right? Secondly, the 5%, the 5% is an aggregate for all costs across, it's food, it's housing, it's things that don't necessarily apply to a municipality. In fact, some of the higher, some of the items with a higher inflation like food and housing aren't something that impact the municipality. We care about the fuel, right? We care about utilities. We care about salt, gravel, those things. That's not necessarily 5%. And there's room in existing budgets to kind of not just do a flat 5% increase to a budget line just because we know something's going on with inflation. So we try and take everything into consideration when we set those budgets. That being said, very difficult year. I think that's another reason to have this contingency funding on hand, because it's very difficult, particularly like inflation has been 2% like clockwork for a number of years now. We don't know what's going on. So, but to your point, all that's been factored in. We know it's not a favorable economic climate. We've put forth an aggressive budget. And I think it's a reasonable one. I'm not too concerned about inflationary overages. We'll manage.
I bought a diesel truck. When I bought the truck, what,
Your mic on?
is that better?
How's that?
That's much better.
Okay. When I bought the truck, gas was 10 cents a liter more than what diesel fuel was. Now when you go to town, diesel fuel is $2 a liter and gas is $1.70. There's a 30-cent difference. And that's what I mean when I'm thinking about, like, we have a lot of our vehicles are diesel. And they're trucks and stuff, and that's got to make a difference. It's just if I could say it's crazy, I can. It's just unbelievable. $2 a liter. Like, it just. I thought you were coming to give me a hug. Feel sorry for me. Well, I'm not going to tell you what it cost. Like, I think I've got an 85-liter tank. And it's just unbelievable. And how people can afford to go back and forth to work even? Like, I just wondered about inflation, that's all. Because it's going to get worse. before it
Any
gets
other
better.
questions for Adam on the budget? Dominique?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. A comment first, maybe just to repeat perhaps what I said at the last budget committee meeting. Just wanted to express my appreciation again for a very, very clear, well-organized document. So I used to constantly look at other municipalities with envy with their budget documents in terms of how clearly it conveyed that, well, first off, the information itself, but also conveys that everything has been looked at. There's a strategy. There are things that are not addressed yet, but there's a plan for addressing them later. That's just an A plus. It just makes it so easy to have, informed discussions. We can see what you're doing. We can see what the plan is. And I think that's one example. For example, this is very clear that we are responding to inflation in terms of our operating budget is going up by at least 4%. Now it may be more with some of the adjustments. But now it's clear that through our own strategies, through additional grants, through good use of growth, then we're able to absorb that inflation down to 2.09. So this is very well explained, and I think it shows just more credit to all of the thinking that goes behind the budget. So very well done on just going line by line and seeing where this year we can cut and without impacting service levels. And so it really looks like there's just been great planning and great analysis. And I think that's what we've been looking for and our residents have been looking for. So well done. And plus a decent result that I think we can afford as ratepayers despite all the financial pressures. So thank you for that. Because of the uncertainty of everything these days, what is your opinion on the, paying debt versus reserves? So I see here the strategies is just maintain the debt payment and maintain the plan. We hear about interest rates probably, going up and as a way to moderate inflation. Right now, the strategy is more towards reserves in terms of stabilizing, which I totally agree with, but I'm wondering if you have an opinion on the debt aspect and when do we start thinking about that?
Thank you. Like I said, I like to use debt primarily for growth-related things, but there is there's merit to using debt for other things as well. Like I can see why debt was used to fund the pier. When I did the capital budget, I talked about this funding equilibrium where if you're spending over this amount, then you're drawing from reserves. And if you're spending under, you're contributing from reserves. The further away you get from that point of equilibrium, the more tempting it is to take on debt, because if you start using all of our reserve funding, it's going to impact capital funding in other areas, and that's not something we really want. The other good thing about debt is it forces the people who are enjoying the purchase or the asset that you've constructed to pay for it, right? As opposed to reserves where past residents save up money essentially and then pay for something that future residents will be enjoying. There's this intergenerational equity to using debt to pay for something of mass significance. The downside being we're charged an interest rate from the bank. That's a higher cost, and that's generally unfavorable. In terms of the way interest rates are going, you're right, interest rates are going up. There seems to be a concerted plan at the upper levels of government to increase interest rates, which would make borrowing less favorable for us. And really, even with Infrastructure Ontario, they don't offer the greatest rates as it is. The best thing about Infrastructure Ontario is that they'll lock you in for like 30 years and never change the rate. So it's a very stable source of funding. I think what we need to do as a municipality is to develop a long-term capital plan and consider debt as part of that, because there may be instances where it's just going to be too much to put on the taxpayer to build up reserves to pay for something of significance. It's going to be too burdensome on current residents to save up for something that future residents are going to be paying for. So I think debt should be considered as part of an overall financial strategy. Hard to say exactly where we're going to land without seeing the full long-term capital plan, though. And I think that's something that, I know it's something that we've been working on the asset management side, and looking forward to council seeing that in the future.
Adam, our long-term debt with the Infrastructure Ontario, that's at very reasonable rates if I remember. In fact, if I remember, it was less than 2. I think it was 1.45 or something. So we'd be crazy to touch that. I mean, basically inflation pays for your debt.
They're good rates. They're not like practically free what some people maybe think they are, but they're good rates. Yeah.
And that's locked in for like 25 or 30 years, I think. Isn't it?
Yeah, you can do a 30-year loan. I'm not sure what we did for the pier off the top of my head, but you can do a 30-year loan, which is not offered at other general banking institutions. So.
Okay. Any other questions for Chester? Chester.
Adam, what is the amount that we have in investment reserves? Would you happen to have that?
I could get that for you. The last investment report that went to council was in September. I believe I'm legislatively required to bring you an investment report once a year. I don't have the number off the top of my head, but it could be something that's easily supplied.
Would that be the same as our regular reserves?
That's a great question. So not all reserves are purely investments. We need to keep cash on hand to fund ongoing operations. So reserves are a mix of cash, investments, and other collectible items that we just haven't received yet. So we play this game where we don't want to have too much cash on hand because we'd rather invest it and earn an income for ratepayers. But we have to be careful with what we do with that, because if we are cash short, then we're taking a line of credit and then we're paying a bank interest, right? So we try and manage the cash flow piece of it on our end. There's a reserve that's used for that. It's called the working fund reserve. The working fund reserve here is mixed with our contingency reserve, so that we're not getting full use of a working fund reserve, which is really meant to be what the cash floor is. You shouldn't invest beyond what's in your working fund reserve because you need that cash flow to fund operations, particularly in the first 3 months of the year, where we haven't received any taxes until March 15th. We're very cash poor during that part of the year.
Max, did you have a question?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have a comment. I agree totally with the deputy mayor's response in regards to the preparation of the budget and the budget itself. I've sat in on quite a number of budgets over the years, and this one, in my mind, takes number one as far as presentation, explanation, and the end result. And I just wish the 24 before this one had been this easy to understand. As we all remember, let's take a step back to 2012. Maybe we shouldn't take that step, but anyway, once again, I do thank our treasurer for the effort and the rest of the staff, the two Adams and everyone else, our clerk that was involved in putting this thing together, because it is number one in my mind. Thank you.
Yeah, very well done. Any other questions or comments? Okay, no correspondence? I assume? Okay, you have another report, Adam? Mhm. Okay. All right, mover and seconder, report number FIN 2207, titled 2022 Draft Operating Budget be received. That municipal council approve the amended 2022 operating budget as presented. Municipal council approve the user fee schedule for 2022 as presented in the 22 draft budget. So mover and seconder. Gare.
Wait, no, actually, it's a question, sorry, Mr. Mayor, before we move. I know, so if I understood the resolution correctly, we would be approving this budget
Yes.
as amended. So I'm just curious, I know we can't discuss it right now, but in closed session, there were some staffing suggestions that have been made by staff that we deferred until we receive information. I would suspect one way or the other, it would have an impact on the operating budget. So I'm wondering, because I'm thinking if we approve this tonight, then we would cancel the next meeting, but we would be doing that without receiving. So I'm not sure if if some of the staffing discussions are still in the works.
Adam?
Thank you, through you, your worship. I do think it be wise that perhaps council defer or hold on to its resolution for this budget this evening. There is some information, some potential recommendations coming to council, and that we maintain the third budget meeting in the event that it's deemed necessary to do so.
Okay, so you're suggesting we defer this tonight?
So I think that would be an appropriate, and I will lean on our treasurer and clerk as well, but if we receive the report in principle this evening, and it'll be decided on at a subsequent budget committee meeting.
Okay, so the second and third bullet point will just cancel, we'll just receive this budget. Okay. Cerna and Lewis, all in favor? Carried. And is there anyone online? Do you know?
Does not look like it.
No? Okay. So no open questions, so
What does it say under attendees? 0? Up in the top right corner, 0? Okay, yeah, I can't see that one. Okay, yeah. Thanks, Alex.
okay, so mover and second of the next budget committee will be held on April 5th, 2022 at 7 p.m. So mover and second for that. Moore and Cerna, all in favor? Okay, mover and seconder that the budget committee adjourn its meeting at 7:55 to meet again on April 5th at 7 p.m. Glinsky and Winder, all in favor? Carried.